84 WHAS. Pleased as punch to have with us in the studio right now, Senator Rand Paul. Hi, welcome.
Hey, great to be here.
Well, I'm glad to have you here as well. And I just said you off the break, got a few things to talk about, but let's get to the important stuff first. So, are you going to run for president? I mean, you can tell me nobody listens to this show.
Now, Mandy, you
Just
promised
me and
me
you.
you wouldn't ask me any hard questions.
No, come on. Come on. It's kind of interesting that this is coming up right now.
The only decision I've made is I won't run against my father. And
That would make an awkward Thanksgiving.
Yeah, you know, he's my landlord, and I'm afraid I might be homeless and won't be able to live with him in his condo anymore.
Yeah, because that would be a lovely story for the news media. Ron Paul kicks out his son in a fit of pique.
That's right. But what I have told people is that I think the Tea Party movement needs to have a place at the table, and that we need to influence who the nominee will be in 2012. The Tea Party movement is like no other movement I've ever seen in my lifetime. It has great strength, and despite what people like Harry Reid says, oh, it's done for, it's dwindling, and I tell people, you know what, it's done for when they balance their budget, when we get out of this enormous debt problem that we have, and we're still a long way away from that. And so I think the Tea Party continues, but I want the Tea Party really to help decide who the nominee will be in 2012.
So we'll clarify, and then I'll move on briefly. If your dad runs in 2012, you're off the ticket. If your dad decides he doesn't want to do it again,
then I think there are open options, and we will explore those options.
Well, that's as close as I've heard so far. That's something. Let's talk about the balanced budget. I got to tell you, we had Congressman Jeff Davis on, and he was talking about the great compromise that I think saved $30 on the budget. Honestly, that's how I felt listening to him. I cannot begin to describe to you the overwhelming disappointment with what's happening with the House Republicans from where I sit right now. I know I'm not alone in that. You've now lofted out a 5-year plan, a very aggressive, some would say completely Pollyanna approach that would balance the budget. First of all, let's talk about your thoughts of what's happening in the House right now.
Well, number one, there are two proposals. There's a Republican proposal and a Democrat proposal. Unfortunately, both of them continue to increase spending as a percentage of our gross domestic product. So, for example, when the Republicans say they're going to cut $61 billion, we just increased spending by $700 billion in the last 2 or 3 years, and the curve on spending still continues to rise. The $61 billion in cuts are cuts against a baseline of spending that is rising. Now, the Democrat proposal isn't even really a proposal. It's $6 billion. We're borrowing $4 billion every day, and we're spending $10 billion every day. So the Democrats just aren't even a serious part of the discussion. The Republicans are trying to go in the right direction. What I'm trying to tell everyone is that both proposals would still give us an annual deficit of over $1.5 trillion. When I ran for office, I told people I wasn't for those kind of deficits. I won't vote for any budget that's not headed towards or has a balanced budget at the end of the line.
So are we going to see Senator Ron Paul ending up the same way Senator Rand Paul, the same way Congressman Ron Paul is, where you really are going to be the senator of no because we're not moving in the right direction?
Well, no, I want to be also the senator that proposes plans for doing it. And I mean, we're the only office other than the president and the leadership that's offering a budget. In fact, we've beaten the Republicans and the Democrats to the table. In our office, our one Senate office, our people put together an entire budget. And so that's something I think that's positive. We put together and crunched the numbers to show America how you would balance the budget if you were serious. And it's not easy. You have to do something. You have to cut federal spending significantly. But we've increased spending significantly. Now we need to go the other way. You,
in the budget that you've proposed, you've been pretty aggressive in cutting complete departments. What are you proposing to go first?
The alternative, if you don't cut departments, is you'd have to cut things like Social Security and Medicare by 1/3. And I don't want to do that, nor do I think the public wants to do that. But there are certain functions of government that I think were never intended to be done in Washington. For example, the Constitution is completely silent on education. Doesn't mean we're not for education, we just think it should be done by the states and the cities and the localities. We think local control's better. We also think there's no objective evidence that spending money at the federal level has improved our kids' scores. So really we think it hasn't worked objectively and we can't afford it. But that's the way we're able to balance the budget, is we eliminate the entire Department of Education other than a few things, and we put those few things we keep into another department.
What are those things? Because the big thing is you want to do away with things like Pell Grants, and is that true?
We actually kept Pell Grants. We put Pell Grants in another department. We spend them at 2008 levels, and we put them in another department. And so even keeping Pell Grants, we're still able to balance the budget in 5 years. But you have to agree, if you want something, if you want Pell Grants, you got to agree you're going to cut somewhere else, because I cannot be in favor of all of this if it leads to a $2 trillion annual deficit.
Have you been surprised, since you've been in Washington, about the, cutting spending is a great idea, but not mine?
Not in my backyard. That's what it is. And yes, and in fact, I tell people the biggest problem we have as Republicans is every Republican office holder, I think, in Washington will vote for a balanced budget amendment. I don't think we'll lose any votes. But most of them come up to me and say, you know what, don't talk about the specific cuts, because people are for a balanced budget, but they're not for the actual cuts. My thing is that you lose your credibility if you don't say what you're going to cut, and also, how will we ever balance a budget? We're not being honest with the people if we don't tell them that it's easy, or if we tell them that it's easy and that it doesn't require cuts. You do have to cut spending, and every lobby that's up there has a reason for their money. And some of them are good causes. You know, everybody's up there has a good story to tell. But I can't bankrupt the country in order to keep providing all the spending at the same level.
I got an email from someone that wanted me to ask you if you would be in favor of legislation or some kind of, I guess it would be legislation, that would prevent states from getting more money back than they sent to the federal government. Kentucky has been the beneficiary of a lot of largesse from other states who don't get back as much money as they send up. Would you be in favor of that?
Well, one of the things we've done that will end some of that is we've ended earmarks. So just by having seniority and getting more earmarks for your state isn't going to happen anymore. We're not earmarking it. Even the president says he's not going to sign anything that has earmarks on it. With Kentucky, I think it's a little bit deceptive, because we have 2 military bases and a lot of soldiers, and their salaries and the money coming to those bases count in that money. So I don't think anybody really wants to eliminate those bases. I'm not for eliminating those bases or the soldiers that are at the bases. I wouldn't count those in the statistics, because Kentucky, because it has 2 military bases, looks like it gets more money than a state that doesn't have a military base. So when you divide all the money out, it looks like, oh, Kentucky's getting more than it sends. But those soldiers aren't just here for Kentucky. They're really here for the whole United States.
So if you could separate out the money that's spent on national defense, which military bases should count in that, then you'd be cool with saying, look, we don't need to get back more than we put in.
Right, and in fact, I think if you really look at things that way, you'd probably find that there's enough money lost in Washington and the bureaucracy that very few states would be getting back more than they pay.